Sup? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the only YouTube channel on the internet. I hope you're doing well, and if you're new here, what are you doing? Come on inside. Come hop on the boat that's sailing the seven seas. Today is going to be quite a personal video for me, because today I am unveiling to you a deep, dark secret of mine, a side of myself that you may not have known. I am not just a weeb. I also read books. It's not that crazy. I know it may come as somewhat of a shock that I don't just ingest manga and anime 24/7. Sometimes I do sit down and dive into some scripture. That's the wrong word, written word. I don't know exactly what I was trying to say there. And I figured that since I caught up to One Piece, it was time for me to jump into another egregiously long fantasy series. And there was no series better for that than The Wheel of Time. I read book 1 in like 10 days. I kind of just ripped through that bitch, and now I'm already into book 2. I actually finished this like 2 weeks ago. I've been kind of sitting on it, letting it stew a little bit. I meant to shoot this video last week. It's not important. I really want to talk about it now though, because I've been sitting with my thoughts on it for a while, and I have a lot that I want to talk about. This series is going to be The Wheel of Time Virgin, but for this book, I'm lying. I'm not actually a verge for this book. I have sullied the cheats, if you will, with this book when I was 15 in my sophomore year of high school. I don't remember almost anything about it. I remembered some of the names and like the ending somewhat. I remembered parts of it a little bit. And as I was reading, some of it came back to me like, oh, I kind of remember this scene, or I remember this character that got introduced later in the book, stuff like that. But I am about as pure and clean on this story as I could have been given the circumstances. Moving forward, however, I will be a complete and total loser virgin for the rest of the books. I am already reading The Great Hunt, like I said, and I am loving it. It takes a drastic turn from the first book, if you ask me. I'm not gonna talk about that right now. We're talking about The Eye of the World, but I'm just gonna say, I'm really liking the second book right now. So the structure of this video is that first I'm gonna give you one positive thing that I really liked about the book and one negative thing that I wasn't so hot on in the book. And the reason I'm doing this is that, particularly with One Piece, I tend to not have a lot of criticisms because I just like to enjoy stories. And if there's something that I dislike, perhaps, I just kind of put it to the side or ignore it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, if you ask me. I just like enjoying things for what I love about them, and if there's something that doesn't totally click with me, I'm able to overlook it a lot of times. So I'm trying to be a little bit more nuanced because I feel like I might just completely lose any ability to, use critical thinking if I don't hone those skills somewhat. So I'm gonna be trying to provide some nuance by giving you one positive and one negative. First off, I'm gonna say that the positive is the characters, by far. Obviously, these characters are memorable. I remembered most of them from like 8 years ago when I read it the first time, and I still remembered most of their names and vaguely their personalities. And something I really liked about these characters, something that I noticed this time that I don't think I would have ever picked up on when I was 15, is the amount of character work that is done within this single book in terms of growth. Because a lot of these characters are built on archetypes. You know, Perrin is sort of the gentle giant. He's this big guy. There's Matt, who's like the trickster, prankster, troublemaker guy. Rand is a guy. He's just a dude. Then you've got Lan, who's like the stoic, badass guy who's kind of able to do everything, and he's really cool and sullen and silent. And there's Morwayn, who's she's like the, mysterious stranger who can do all sorts of magic. There's a lot of archetypes that are built here, and they're foundations that I recognize within a story, especially now more than ever, now that I'm better read than I was when I was a teenager. And so I recognized those archetypes going in, but something that I was able to appreciate is how Robert Jordan takes those archetypes and develops them throughout the story in such a way that at the end of this book, and this is just book 1 of 14, at the end of this book, the characters, particularly the main 3 of Rand, Matt, and Perrin, have gone through traumatic transformations. They've undergone horrific experiences, and they've seen things that have changed the way that they perceive the world and the way that they act, but they still remain who they are at their core. They still retain their core personality while also having these great changes within them. Because, you know, they go through quite a bit. You know, they're hunted by monsters for half the book, have horrific dream sequences, have this insane bond with wolves, you know, unlock a power that could possibly drive you insane, get a dagger that could potentially end all of humanity. You know, normal stuff that everybody goes through. And I really appreciated how Robert Jordan was able to show us these characters who are, in essence, you know, teenagers. They're people who aren't fully developed, and seeing how they handle these situations and how they go through these life-altering moments and come out the other side changed, yes, but still retaining, you know, who they were at the beginning of the book. And I really enjoyed that aspect of just seeing how they grew. And obviously, it was growth through trial, but I enjoyed it anyway. As for the negative, this is something I had to sit down and ponder on for a while because I tend to, like I say, overlook stuff if I don't enjoy it quite a lot. But I guess if I had to choose something from the eye of the world, it is the relationship work. I would say particularly through like male and females. I didn't really click with a lot of it. I guess Rand and Egwene I understood because they are, you know, in essence teenagers. I don't know how old they're supposed to be. Like oldest they are is like 18, right? And I understand sort of like, okay, yeah, they're young people, they're passionate for each other, they have this puppy dog love almost, and I understand like the flare of emotions between them and how a lot of it doesn't need a foundation. They just, you know, they think each other are attractive and that's enough for them. I understood that. Nynaeve and Lan, however, felt completely out of nowhere for me. Like I looking back, I was able to see sort of the hints and signs of like their dynamic building where they have like these competitions sort of that they're having with each other, and it's like subtle forms of flirting, I guess, but I didn't really buy it when they had that conversation that Rand overheard where Nynaeve was like proclaiming her love to him and he's like low-key saying that he loves her too, but like can't, you know, it's unrequited or whatever. That's not the right word. You know what I mean? It's like something he can't reciprocate, and I didn't totally buy it. It felt like it came out of nowhere a little bit, and it wasn't a huge plot point. So like I said, I was very easily able to overlook it because it happened and it went. Like I didn't really dwell on it for very long. I do hope that it gets explored in further books because I'm willing to like sit and let it develop. You know, this doesn't have to be like, oh, I don't like it and I don't like it for the rest of the series. I see a world eventually in which I do get invested in their relationship. Just in this book, I wasn't, and I didn't understand that conversation. Like it felt out of place to me. And I wasn't particularly invested in Rand and Egwene's relationship either, but I did understand it a little bit better. I think this is a good point for me to mention now while I'm talking about relationships. One of my favorite bits in this book, now I'm going back to positive stuff, but one of my favorite bits in this book is that is when the boys are like thinking about women, they're thinking about how they wish they had their friend's way with women, particularly Rand and Perrin. They're like, oh man, I wish I had Perrin's way with women. He always knows what to say. And then Perrin is like, oh, I wish I had Rand's way with women. He always knows what to say with women. And I thought that was really funny. I hope that joke continues because it made me laugh. After like the third time, I was like, this is definitely intentional. But anyways, guys, now that I'm past those first positive and negatives, I want to get just into the plot. I'm going to try and take it as beat by beat as I can and kind of share you my thoughts and reactions and feelings to everything because there is a lot in this book and there's a lot that I want to discuss because I've been stewing on it for a while and I've like made connections in my brain. I don't know if they're right or what, but I have to get them out there. So first off, the beginning of this book is, I think, very generic, and that's okay. I love the trope of like, oh, village boys from this secluded corner of the world that haven't seen or done anything, and they're introduced to the world by a mysterious figure. I love that trope. It works in Lord of the Rings. It works here. It always works. I haven't really ever encountered a place where it hasn't worked. I love that shit, okay? It's great. And so I was not upset with that at all. And something that I think that is done brilliantly in this first like 100 to 150 pages before everyone leaves the two rivers, I'm going to call that like the intro section. That section there is packed full of really vital stuff to the story, and it has a lot of the things that got me hooked on the story right off the bat. The first thing here that I'm going to want to talk about is the history that is established just in this 150 pages and sort of the greater overarching story that it hints at. Because when Moiraine is talking about what the two rivers used to be, I believe it's Manetheren is how you say it, I could be totally wrong on that, but when she's talking about it and telling them the story of what Manetheren was, she says it was like a thorn in the Dark One's heel or whatever. That might be wrong too, but it was something like that. And she's telling the story of how the people who used to live here, their ancestors were these really battle-hardened people who fought valiantly against the Dark One. And I thought it was such a fascinating story. For one, because it has that saying of like, oh, the Manetheren blood sings or whatever, and then later on, Matt has that whole moment where he starts screaming Manetheren, language or whatever, which was a mind-blowing moment, and I really hope that gets explored further because I was a little bit in shock. I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? And we never explored it, and I'm assuming it's gonna come back later. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I wanted to talk about this because this establishes something that is super important for the rest of the book, which is all of the history that is hinted at. Like, we explore pieces of history that kind of like lay the foundation for what I imagine is like an enormous mosaic of history that is hidden within these pages, and we just get like the little nibbles into that history in this first book, and they're scattered all throughout, and you kind of just never know when they're gonna come. It's like, oh yeah, we walked past this monument, and here's a whole 3 pages about why this monument was important and what happened to create this monument, and then you don't come back to it. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way that this is just included in the book and it's not gonna come back or be important for some reason. Even if it's not directly important, it's hinting at a history that is rich with details that are needed to give, I guess, context to what is happening now, and I loved that. And this is something that's done from the very beginning, like with that history of Manetheren, but something I also really loved in the beginning was the air of mystery that is created. If you watch my One Piece videos, if you've been on the channel for a while, you know that my favorite thing in stories is when you're able to establish a mystery, to establish something that goes unanswered, and you just kind of leave it hanging, leave it dangling in the background, and if it's pulled off correctly when you like reveal what the answer to that mystery is, there's nothing better, bro. There is literally nothing better. It is the greatest feeling of all time. That is why One Piece is my favorite work of fiction, because it does it so fucking well. I mean, there's a million reasons why One Piece is my favorite work, but that's something it does really well, and I can kind of see the seeds of that in Wheel of Time right now, particularly at the beginning when Tam is having like his fever dreams ramblings or whatever, and he's talking about I still don't really fully know what's going on there, but he's talking about some kind of battle that happened and like potentially hints at Rand not being a Two Rivers baby, and like has all these weird funky things that he says, and it's just left there. And Rand is like, I'm gonna be stubborn about this and pretend I didn't hear anything. And then he just like, that's what he does. He pretends he didn't hear anything. But that was there, and there's no fucking way it was just some bullshit that he was spouting off. It's definitely important. And the entire book, I was waiting. I was like waiting in anticipation, hoping that some kind of information would be revealed that would answer all the questions that arose from that one moment. And the thing is, that's just one example of many things that are like random mysteries that are brought up throughout this book and that are left dangling in the background. And that gets me super excited because, I mean, this series is beloved. I'm gonna assume that it does things well in the future, and I already know that I'm gonna get super hyped when a lot of these answers eventually come to me, and that gets me very, very excited to read the rest of the series because I am already invested in them. I will get to some of the more mysteries later that I am already very curious about, but for now, I want to stay on the intro sequence. I will say that I really liked that whole thing with Tam and Rand, and there was a couple other things that I wanted to discuss in that intro sequence. For one, I really liked the character work that was done at the beginning of this. I already spent some time talking about the overarching character work, so I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, but I think it does a fantastic job at establishing archetypes right off the bat and establishing character dynamics right off the bat. There is no question as to who is friends with who, sort of whose personality is what, and sort of the connections that this community has, and it does an excellent job at building up this small community, and it gives you just enough history and just enough of depth depth to this area that you're a little bit sad when you leave. You kind of feel the melancholy that the characters feel at leaving their hometown, because you know just enough about it. You understand their culture, you understand sort of the structure of the village, and you understand how this affected our characters before they leave the village. You understand how this has molded them to be the people that they are now, and I think that's brilliantly done, because there is a lot, like I said, there's a lot packed in to this first 150 pages, and to pull that off alongside all of the character work and all of the world building and all of the plot setting that is done, it's genius. I mean, it is truly genius. I think that was one of the most effective parts at the beginning of this book. But it doesn't take super long for our characters to leave the two rivers after the Trolloc invasion that happens. I'm probably saying Trolloc wrong. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to talk about that. The pronunciations might be wrong. That's fine. But they leave very soon, and they're pursued by horrific beasts and monsters. There's the fucking bat things. There's the Trollocs, the Murdral, which are horrifying. There was a lot more horror in this book than I thought there was going to be. There were a lot of like dream sequences that were super trippy and like fucked up. That shit was awesome. I don't know if I just was like too young to like picture it in my head, but some of the imagery that is done in this book is fucking wild, dude. I loved it. Anyway, it starts off pretty quick. They're going out, and I loved seeing very quickly they have an encounter with the Trollocs, and Moraine Sedai uses this insane fucking magic that was awesome. It was awesome. I love the one power already. It has so many uses. I can be a sucker for a hard magic system. I don't know how hard the magic system is going to get in this series, but I'm also a sucker for like a magic system that can literally just be like, and I stab my staff into the ground and a huge explosion goes off, because that shit can be awesome sometimes. Really, after they leave the two rivers, the plot is moving at a pretty quick pace for the rest of the book. I mean, there are moments of downtime and there is moments of just like character interaction, but for the most part, our characters are going through very horrific trials and tribulations from that moment moving forward, because they get separated at Shadar Logoth not long after that. And Shadar Logoth, I really want to talk about this sequence here, because to me, at first when I was reading it, I was like, this is fucking wild, because they meet, I think his name is Mordeth. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, but it's the dude who's the fucking dude who's trapped in Shadar Logoth, and that Matt takes the knife from. When he showed up, I was so dumbfounded, because as soon as Moraine explains like who he is and what the implications are of like what could be done if his power is unleashed, I was like, what the fuck? Like, we have another world-ending, like, we have another world-ending threat that they just encountered. Like, what the out of nowhere in like the first fourth of the book, bro, I was so shocked. But looking back after I finished the story, I was like, actually, that's kind of ingenious, because like I said, I'm aware that this is a 14-book series and that there was a lot of time to explore everything that is set up in this book, and to set up this like evil force that is in this abandoned city not that far from their home, and that Matt now has a connection to, and that has potential world-ending implications. To just throw that in at the beginning of the book and then just move on from it, holy shit, dude. Like, that is so ballsy. And that whole encounter with Mordeth is really cool, too. It's one of those trippier sequences that I was talking about, where his head expands and then he's fucking chasing them, and then Matt is a dumbass and he grabs the knife. But it makes sense. Oh my god, I'm going off on another tangent. But it makes sense for Matt's character that he grabs the knife, because he is this naive young kid who hasn't seen much of the world. He doesn't understand, I don't think, at that point, just how much danger he is in. And I don't think any of them do. I don't think any of them understand sort of just how dire their situation is until that point when they're separated. And after that point, I mean, after that point, they're basically all at death's door at any given point. So I think that at that point, it becomes a lot more real for them. So it was a needed event in terms of character growth to sort of show these young men exactly what they're getting into, because up until that point, they had encountered Trollocs. They had moments of fear and moments of intensity, but they hadn't actually encountered something that could have just fucking destroyed the entire planet. So if you're gonna do stakes building, that's the way to do it. From this point forward, I really want to talk about the individual plot lines, because everyone splits up. I want to talk about them one by one, and then I'll reconvene when all the characters are sort of back together. I don't remember what city it's. Is it Bear Lawn when they meet back up? I could be I think I'm wrong about that. But anyway, I want to talk about the individual plot lines because otherwise I'm going to get totally lost in the sauce. And I want to talk about the specific beats and sort of the character moments that happen. So first I want to talk about Perrin and Egwene, which I thought was an odd matching at first because they were two characters that had little to no interaction up until that point. And then all of a sudden they're paired together. They're alone in the wilderness. They're struggling to survive. And then we get yet another, like, holy fuck, like, moment in terms of the plot, because this whole time you think that the plot is about, oh, the Dark One is coming for the Dragon Reborn, and that's sort of what the story is about. And obviously it's Rand because he's the main character. But then all of a sudden there's this shit going on with the wolves, and Perrin's eyes are turning yellow, and he can hear fucking wolves in his head, and that's yet another thing that Robert Jordan's like, oh, here's something fucking wild, and then he moves on from it, and he's like, yeah, we'll figure that out later. We'll figure that out later. And I felt really bad for Perrin in this entire sequence here because I'm going to talk about him specifically. I want to talk about Egwene too, but at the end of the sequence when they're captured by the White Cloaks, which is, oh my god, dude, there's so many things I need to talk about. But when he's captured by the White Cloaks, he's already facing a level of terror because he's scared of what he's becoming. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't comprehend what is happening to him. And I think there's a level of he already feels shame because Perrin is a very I don't know what word I'm looking for, devout, I guess, person for the light, and he's someone who's very superstitious and believes a lot of the stories and is very, I guess, upright morally. And so when this is happening to him, I think he already feels shame, and then to meet a group of people who embodies sort of his belief system in a way, even though they're not, I'm going to talk about them, but they're not that, but I want to talk about them a little bit. But for him to meet them and then for them to declare him a dark friend and to make him feel even worse about himself, I just felt so bad for him, dude, because he was already going through so much, and then for that to happen, you know, I think that really just pushed him in a direction that was not great for him mentally. Obviously, by the end of this book, you know, he's so timid and he doesn't want to look at anyone, keeps his eyes down. And I feel so bad for Perrin by the end of this book. I want him to be happy. He is like, and he's such a nice guy. Like, obviously, he's a little old-fashioned somewhat, but like, at his core, he is a nice guy, and he is like, you know, the gentle giant. I'm always rooting for them, and anyway, his whole plot line was very, very intriguing to me, and I actually did remember the whole thing with wolves, but I was still surprised by it when it came back because I forgot how early on it happened and how fast it happened. But now I want to talk about Egwene's part in this, and Egwene, I'm not sure I have a whole lot I want to say about her because her whole thing right now is that she wants to become an Aes Sedai, which she jumps on that opportunity right away. She does not hesitate in, like, she finds out that she can do it, and she's like, fuck yeah, I'm in. I'm gonna do it. And okay, like, compared to everyone else, she was so ambitious, and I think that was part of the reason that her and Perrin or paired together there were to show sort of the dichotomy between them, because she is the polar opposite of him. She is very, very different in her belief system and sort of what she wants out of life. Like, Perrin's like, get me the fuck back home. I don't want any of this. Egwene's like, I'm getting this awesome power. I get to go see stuff. Hell yeah. And I thought that's part of the reason I thought their pairing was so interesting. Look at this goober. What is he doing? He's attacking something. Anyway, something that they encounter along this plot line with the two of them is the traveling people, which, oh my god, dude, I loved this because, again, this just adds so much depth to the world. I want to talk about the world for a second, actually. Oh god, I keep getting on tangents, but I want to talk about the world because this is book one, and there's already so much culture introduced. There are so many conflicts introduced, like, for instance, the whole thing with the queen and the beliefs of the people who are turning on the queen because she's working with an Aes Sedai, and sort of, a lot of it revolves around the Aes Sedai, actually, is the way the culture is introduced, is around the Aes Sedai, and how people feel about them is kind of a moniker for their entire belief system and what culture they come from, and that is done very well in the Queen's case. But with the traveling people, this is another example of world building that is done that is so subtle in a way, because it introduces this entire nomadic tribe that is looking for this lost song, which I had a thought about this. This is the connection I made. Oh my god, I keep going off track. But anyway, I had a thought about this because they're this traveling tribe looking for a lost song. The only other time that something song-wise comes into the story is when they're mentioning that the blood of Manetheren sings still. Sing, song, Could they be related to Manetheren at all? No, probably not. It made a connection in my head and I'm rolling with it. But they were just so fascinating to throw this culture in there that is basically separate from everything else that's going on. And they also have mention of like the ale and stuff. I'm probably saying that wrong. And all these other countries, you get mentions of them and you get hints of their culture and their way of being. Because like with the ale, with this first book, we never meet a single one of them except for Rand. He's obviously one of them. We don't meet any of them, but we already sort of know their culture. We understand that they're like a warrior culture. They're like this country of warriors or people of warriors. I don't think they have their own country, but we understand that, and they're just people that are mentioned. And I think the traveling people, going back to the traveling people, I think they were a great example of how Robert Jordan is able to introduce a culture and build it up and integrate it into the world in a way that makes sense and that is satisfying right away. What are you doing? I am shooting a video. Anyway, now I want to talk about Moiraine and Nynaeve and Lan. Their storyline is definitely the shortest of the three of them, but they do have an interesting conflict here between the three of them because they don't really encounter any danger until they're like invading the White Cloak camp to save Perrin and Egwene. But before then, there's this interesting conflict of Nynaeve clearly went after this entire group to get the boys back and to get Egwene back because they don't trust the Aes Sedai. She doesn't trust her at all, and she feels responsible for these people because she's the village wisdom, and she has this level of responsibility for their well-being. And it wasn't super engaging. This was definitely the least important storyline to me. It was the one that I least enjoyed coming back to, but I do think that their dynamic as a trio is very interesting because clearly at the end we find out that Nynaeve and Lan have like feelings for each other, and Moiraine and Nynaeve kind of hate each other, and it's just like this weird triangle of people that have come together. And I'm really interested in learning more about Moiraine as a person and sort of her relationship to Lan, because clearly they're very close, not just as Aes Sedai and Warder, but just as people. They seem to be very, very close, and I'm wondering how their relationship began and sort of how it's developed to the point it's at now. Also, I'm very interested in Lan as a character because of the whole thing with the Seven Towers, and he like should be a king, and how did he become a warder? He's super cool. Lan is awesome. I love him. He is a really interesting character. He is super engaging anytime he's on the page, and he is I'm so fascinated by him. He's so badass. I like him a lot. Anyway, now let's move on to what I would consider to be the main plot line of the book, which is Mat and Rand. And their plot line is so intense for the entire time that it's just the two of them traveling together, because it's basically a survival horror story that they're going through. It is not what I imagined when I read it the first time. For some reason, I had the idea in my head, because I remembered that it was like the two of them that were together. But for some reason, I imagined it as being this like adventure where they're plowing ahead to their goal. That's not what's happening. They are in survival mode the entire time. They're sleeping on the side of the road, they're sleeping in haystacks, they're stealing food, they're working to get what they can after Tom Merrilin dies. I don't think he's dead, it's fine. In particular, I loved the sequence where I think it's an innkeeper is trying to steal Rand's Huron Mark sword, which is another thing I'll get to, but he's trying to steal it, and then they're also being cornered on the other side by Dark Friends and a Myrddraal, and then they're standing in the middle of this thing, and then lightning strikes, and they're blown away, and they're running away in the in the rain, and one of them has a fever, and they're just, oh my god, it's so intense. They are at their wits' end the entire time. And I did not realize the first read through when 8 years ago or whatever, just how fucking traumatic this whole experience was for them, because I didn't understand just how horrible it must have been. But now I understand. I'm like, holy fuck, this is so bad. Like, they went through so much. And on top of that, even while they're experiencing all these horrors in the day, when they go to sleep, they're fucking running from the Dark One. And they're having these terrible, horrible, psychedelic dreams. And they just can't they don't get a single moment of fucking rest. The entire book. Like, they are just going through so much shit the entire time. And as much as I feel bad for the point of view character, Rand, who is clearly going through a lot, I feel a lot worse for Mat, even though it was his own dumbass fault for taking the knife. Whatever, doesn't matter. I feel worse for him because he's clearly going insane because of the dagger, and he's going through this. Poor fucking guy cannot get a break. None of them can get a break. And their plotline in particular really took off for me once they arrive. I can't remember what city it is. I believe it's Baerlon, when they arrive at Baerlon. and it's the queen is there, and there's all the people there, and it's like almost a civil war because everyone's choosing sides, because some of them don't like that the queen is working with an Aes Sedai and the rest of them are queen supporters, and they arrive, and it's just like, it is just all out fucking like that whole sequence where the false dragon is being taken into this city. I can't remember his name, but he's being taken into the city, and Rand's just trying to see the procession, and he falls into the queen's garden. Bro, that is 100%, oh my god, there's so much to talk about, but that is 100% a weaving of the wheel, if you will. If I can say that as a virgin, I believe that was a weaving of the wheel, that was fate somehow, that he would stumble into there. There's no fucking way she just accidentally chose the Queen's Garden wall by, like, and there wasn't some kind of weaving of the wheel, okay? Like, 100%. And that whole interaction with the Aes Sedai, who's like, oh, the world is gonna end and this man stands at the center of it. Holy fuck, that was awesome. Listen, this was my favorite part of the book. This is probably my favorite singular moment of the book, was just like this, the whole thing with the prophecy of there being the dragon reborn, and then just all of it culminating to this moment of like Rand standing there totally defenseless in like the biggest moment of his life, encountering royalty, encountering all these incredibly powerful people, and this woman under her breath says to him that he is literally going to be responsible for the end of the world. Shit was wild. I really like prophecy stuff. I'm really big into prophecies, and I love when prophecies culminate, and I just loved that moment. I thought it was fantastic. Anyway, this also relates to the whole ta'veren thing. I believe I'm saying that right based on the glossary. The whole ta'veren thing where it's like you don't have to be the chosen one to be like super important within this story, and I think that's a very unique way of like having these other characters remain important, because clearly they're going to remain important. He wouldn't be building up their plot lines if not. But because obviously Rand is the chosen one. He's the dragon reborn. But there's more like chosen ones, I guess, in that regard, because they're ta'veren, and I think that's sort of what this woman might have been seeing in Rand, is that he's ta'veren, and that she might have seen that he's at the center of the world somehow. I don't know. But interesting stuff there. Also, the Huron Marked Blade, I want to talk about that real quick. The Huron Marked Blade, very fascinating little bit of lore and world building there, that it's like master bladesmen have it, and like how the fuck did Rand's dad get that? Like, it's apparently super rare, and like the way it's able to be used, like some people want to steal it, some people fear Rand for it. Like, there's a lot of different utilizations it can have without ever actually fighting with it, which is a very interesting way to have an object operate within a story. Anyway, I'm running out of time because my phone is going to die, and that's my camera, so I'm gonna just like get through the end of this. There's not a whole lot that I want to talk about from this point forward. I really do think that the ways are super interesting, because like this is the whole breaking of the world thing. I don't totally understand it yet. I'm sure that's going to be explored further, but I don't understand exactly what occurred at the breaking of the world. I don't fully get what happened there. Clearly the ways were affected by that, and I would love to know what the ways were like before, and I just think that's such an interesting way of showing sort of this darkness and destruction and corruption that has taken over the world, that just exists, that people just it's just there, and people like are like, oh well, like, we can't do anything about this, the world is just corrupted, and that is so fascinating. That was one of the most imaginative parts, I think, of this book, was just the ways, and then when they arrive at the Eye of the World, and there's the Green Man, who I will say was yet another, I wouldn't say he was disappointing, but I wish we had gotten more of him, because really they get like the one conversation with him, and then the Forsaken arrive, and then he dies, and it's like, it was like sad, because it was like this mythical being that had been, built up for a while, but like, I don't know, it was just like, oh, he's gone now, he's dead. I was like, oh, well, I kind of wish he had been in the story a little bit more. That's fine, though. And while I'm on the topic of the Green Man, I totally forgot to talk about Loial, which was another, oh my god, it's just so wonderful the way that this story is able to just throw in these things. Like oh, now we have this, like, half-beast man, the Ogier, and the Ogier are fascinating. There's so much to talk about. The Ogier are fascinating. They're fascinating. The way they built these, like, ancient steadings that were like these, I don't really know how to explain them. I don't know what they were, but like they were like these areas of like natural beauty, and they've been taken over by men, and like none of the natural beauty is there anymore, and the Ogier live for forever, and they are the definition of gentle giants. I guess if you're going past Perrin level gentle giant, it's then Ogier, and I think that Loial is such an interesting character to just throw in there. Again, like I thought the main cast was assembled, and then all of a sudden we're getting another guy who is immediately lovable, and who immediately provides like this safety and comfort for Rand, and I love Loial. He's already one of my favorite characters. Anyway, I really want to talk about the end of this book real quick, because I have a lot of thoughts about this. For one, the Eye of the World was very interesting. It's like the well of like power, and like the male I was kind of confused. I'd have to go back and read it, but it was not what I was expecting. When they got there, it was not what I was expecting. The whole encounter was not what I was expecting, because the Forsaken kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, it was set up that like, oh, we need to get there or else the world is going to end, but like they came out of nowhere. I was so surprised by their arrival, and I was like, holy shit, these guys are just here now. And the whole encounter was super climactic, but also weirdly anticlimactic at the same time. I don't know how those two things can coexist at the same time, but like these super powerful beings arrive, and I was like, holy shit, they're gonna like kill someone, or they're gonna do something crazy, and all they really accomplished was like making some people run away, harming Moiraine, and then like encountering Rand, and then Rand starts channeling, and that's kind of it. They're just kind of dead. But it was also climactic, because it was like, holy shit, these like insanely powerful people are here, and now the whole plan is ruined, and now we gotta run away, and they kill, like, I don't know how to explain my feelings on that, but that's not exactly what I want to talk about anyway. What I really want to talk about is when Rand channels, because to me, this is totally different than what I was expecting from the conclusion of this book. Normally, at the end of a book like this, something that is high fantasy, that is, very much built on like a chosen one trope, the end of the book would be like this massive triumph. It would be this big moment of triumph. It would be like this almost celebration of like, I unlocked my powers. A good example I can think of this is fucking the Stormlight Archive. I have them on my shelf back here. That is a big thing that is done at the end of some of those books, is like they unlock a power, and it's like this huge moment of triumph of like, we overcame, and like it's just outpouring of power. And this is that. The ending of the Eye of the World is that, but totally the reverse. It is not a triumph at all. It is a horrifying moment for Rand, because in his mind, he can't control what he's doing. And it's, I don't know if I was just smoking crack when I was younger, but I remembered the ending of this book as being that triumphant climax, but that's not what it is. Rand is pounding the ground, howling in desperation, trying to stop. He does not want this to happen. He is horrified by what is going on, and it's kind of epic the way that he stands in front of an army and destroys it, but also the moment inside of him is terror. He does not want this to happen, and it is so, like, that is genius to have a moment that is both epic and terrifying and builds the character in a way, because now he's unlocking this part of himself that is integral to the story and to himself, and he's trying to deny it, and that is, dude, I loved it. I loved that part of it. That is not something I have seen almost ever in a story. And it's very representative of the theme that ends the book, of Rand being afraid of who he has become and sort of wanting to distance himself from people and not being sure of what he should do, because he loves these people, he loves his friends, and he wants to be with them, but also he's afraid of hurting them, and he's afraid of hurting himself, and he doesn't know what to do. And that is a fascinating way to end this book, because this started out very much as a classic fantasy adventure, and it ends on an entirely different note of like I know in a lot of ways, a psychological character study of a man who is being given power that he does not want. Genius. That is genius. But other than that, the scene was just fucking awesome. The details were awesome. It was awesome the way that he summons a sword of light and like slashes the binds on Balzamon's back and stuff. Dude, shit was awesome. It was so cool. It was so vivid. I loved that conclusion. I was totally enraptured by what was going on there. And I think that the ending of this book is possibly the best ending I could have hoped for in terms of setting the stage for future books, while also having, like I said, an epic moment, but it leaves you in this place of like, wow, literally nothing is resolved here, and like this character is going to have conflict in the future because he does not know what the fuck is going on, and I think that is fascinating. I loved it. I cannot wait to get further into the second book. I'm already like 200 pages in. I'm just tearing through it. The second book is amazing so far. It starts off really, really strong, and a lot of the things that I've been talking about that I love in this book, it is really expounding upon, and dude, I can't wait to talk about it because I already have a lot of thoughts, but I'm gonna refrain. I'm gonna save them for the next video. I am probably forgetting things that I wanted to talk about in this book. I kind of had to rush here at the end, but that's okay because if I miss anything and I want to talk about it, I will cover it in the next video because I'm going to be covering all 14 of these books. There's probably gonna be even more videos included within that. I'm probably gonna do, top 10 characters, stuff like that, bullshit like that I'm doing for One Piece right now. I love doing that kind of stuff, but I'm really excited because I really like the beginning of this series, and I've been told that it basically only improves. I have been told of the slog, but I know that a lot of people think that there's a slog, but people say the same shit about One Piece where they're like, oh, this arc is really bad, and I didn't think any of One Piece was bad, so I have no expectations for that. I am just gonna go in, I'm gonna take it as it is, and I'm probably gonna very much enjoy it, considering this is a book that a lot of people say is just mediocre in the series, and I thought it was fantastic, and The Great Hunt is already amazing. So, anyways, guys, expect the next video probably in like, at most a couple weeks. I mean, I'm tearing through The Great Hunt, and I'm probably just gonna talk about it as soon as I'm done. I'd probably have like a video a month moving forward, potentially more depending on how fast I'm going with each book and what else I'm reading at the time, but at the least I'd say one of these per month moving forward. I might try and make it a goal to be done by the end of the year. I think I could potentially pull that off. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and hearing me rant and ramble about this series. I am very much enjoying making this video right now. I could talk for probably another hour if I really wanted to. Let me know what your thoughts and feelings are about the Eye of the World. Let me know if there's anything that I should have talked about that potentially I skipped over. And if you're still hanging around, make sure you like and subscribe. Come hang out for the next one. And until next time, I hope you're happy and healthy. I hope you're doing well. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.